Hello and welcome to the Noise Filters podcast. Today, our guest is Chris Taylor, the lead designer on games such as Supreme Commander, Demigod, and Total Annihilation, and the founding father of Gas Power Games. Hello, Chris. How are you doing? You all right?
I'm good. I'm doing great, and I'll only make one comment just to start our interview.
Did I get it wrong?
I was not the lead designer on Demigod.
Oh, were you not? Okay.
There was, yeah. And although it was a great game, It had a somewhat troubled and complex development. And I'm really proud of the work the guys did. But if they were watching it, they would be irked if I took credit for their hard work. So anyway. How the heck are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very well. I like to start an interview with me getting something wrong at the start.
Hey, it's drama.
Yeah.
It's drama. We like a little bit of drama.
Maybe
a tree will fall on my house during this interview, and it'll be one of the most watched because it'll be like Taylor died. It's so good. You gotta watch it.
Watch the branch coming in right now.
Right through my neck.
So, since you've kind of moved away from Gas Power Games and those games, you have now started your own thing called Kanoogi, and you're working on Intergalactic Space Empire. For people that don't know what that is, what is that going to look like, or give us as much information as you would like to about it?
Well, you know, it's interesting, and I do ramble. And I'm guilty of that, but I'm also aware of it. So I'm going to do my best to be brief, and then you can go in and ask me some more questions. This will be our format, you know? So I started off when I was like 14. I had my first computer back in 1980. Yeah, you can do the math. I'm 54 years old, so I'm an old fucker. Can I swear on the show?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It is 2020. Swearing is now cool.
It's all right. It's okay.
We didn't swear back in the 80s like this on any kind of television or anything. It was like, oh, that's no good. But nowadays it's full on. We're just pistola. So anyways, when I was that young age, everything was like an indie game. You were working away on your computer, you were making something, and it was the most fun you could have. And then as I got my first job when I was 21. I was the lead designer and lead engineer, and I had support from a gentleman who did libraries, and I had and Chris, another Chris, he did music, and Tony did art, and that was the team. And then as it got on, it was like 50 people, 100 people, 200 people, and it just got turned into like a movie production, where it was all business, it was all money, it was all what's the return on investment, what's the market, and all the fun slowly disappeared, and it had to become about the money at the end of that journey. So I said, time out. I've had it with this. It's got to come back to the gameplay. It's got to come back to the fun of making it and crafting it. So I basically started Kanoogi, kind of semi-officially at the beginning of 17, with the idea that I would code everything, that I would create the art. So basically we already knew what that was called. It's called indie.
Yeah.
Now indie is a pretty covers a wide swath, right? It could be one person working in the basement in the dark. It could be a team of 8 people working across the world, all contributing. But it tries to mean independent from your money, independent from a publisher, right? Independent from oversight, independently funded, maybe on your own money. And so, that was the goal, and that's what I set out to do. And then I thought, okay, what's the angle? Do I want to do a game on Unity, for example, and put it on Steam or Good Old Games or Epic Store? And I was like, that's just not. It's just gonna feel like I'm just gonna try to have to duplicate what I did with a big team.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna have to do it with a really small team. Now that just means that all I'm doing is instead of climbing Mount Everest with a team of experts and professionals supporting me, I'm going to climb Mount Everest in the nude.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you're done, you're going to get to the top and go, I'm at the top. And people will say, well, that's not that interesting, because people get to the top of Mount Everest, kind of all the time. Yeah. And it's dangerous and perilous, and you could die, there's a lot of death. But you didn't go to the top of a new mountain. There's nothing new in that. You just did it more challenging. You just made it more difficult for yourself. So good for you, I guess, that you worked really hard and you built something. So I thought, that's dumb. So it was like, okay, what if I built it so that it ran in a browser, so you could play it on whether it was a Mac or a PC or a Linux operating system or an iPhone or an Apple TV. Like, what if it was made so that it could run on any modern browser? And then I was like, when I got into that, I was like, oh, but wait, the browser isn't very performant, which means it doesn't have the power in and of itself to also do the game simulation and the rendering. And
Yeah.
that's largely true. But something way, way, way more important than that was that it wasn't secure. There's no way to secure your intellectual property in a browser if you run the whole game in the browser.
Okay.
So what I realized was if I run it in the cloud, I was talking to a friend who's a cloud architect, and he said, you should just run the game in the cloud. And I was like, oh, that's it. That's it. So what I did was I started poking around and looking at the Google Cloud, and I realized this is a perfect marriage, cloud and browser. And of course, this is a paradigm. This is an architectural paradigm that's used all over the place. It's not even new, but it's not really used for games. Some games are doing it, but it's not, it wasn't done very often, and it wasn't done in terms of the kinds of games that I made, real-time strategy games,
Yeah.
where you're moving thousands or at least potentially 500 or more units around at once, and they're all shooting and exploding. That was like and that was definitely not happening in a browser. It was happening more like maybe you ran a sim in a cloud, and then maybe you ran in a native app.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting a little technical here, but folks need to know that when you build a native app, you download and install a native app, you're installing all the textures, you're installing all of the support on the meshes, all of the heavy content that you need to run a game. And when you run it in a browser, you're pulling it down in real time as you need it. The technical challenge there is daunting from a resource management perspective, but it's not super daunting. It's just like, you're going to have to you have to really screw your head on, right? Because you have to realize that when a person pushes a button to play a game, they will tolerate a little bit of loading time on a bar, but they don't tolerate a lot.
No.
If it's a lotto bar, you're out. It's X. I'm done. I don't care. So all of that was on my mind. I came to this conclusion that I had the right balance between cloud and browser. Technology was moving in a certain direction, and the compatibility of browsers was finally getting completely sorted out, because in the old days, there was IE, 5, 6, 7, this, that, and they were all doing something a little wacky, a little different. And it made it really, really hard to build anything that ran across all browsers.
Yeah.
Right. I could talk for an hour on that. So I've already rambled. I just said I was going to try not to ramble, and I just rambled.
No, it's good. Because that is actually what I want to know.
Context. Really. There's the context for Kanoogi, and I want to build this game, Intergalactic Space Empire. So I started off in 2017 in earnest. Wrote the first line of code in July, and here I am 3 years into it, and I feel like, well, maybe I'm halfway through the journey. Maybe I'm 3/4 of the way, but I keep discovering new interesting things, and it could be. I hope I don't die with Intergalactic Space Empire partly developed. That would suck, but it's not off the table. Okay, you know what I mean? It could happen. Especially if the tree does fall on me.
Yeah, hopefully not.
Yeah, you know what though? I'm at the point where I just think it's all part of the grand plan. Death by tree.
Like
Where's
God's...
Eddie Izzard when you need him?
Yeah.
Death by tree. Wait a minute, he never said that. Death by cake.
Death by cake, yeah.
Yeah, death by cake.
So, I guess we're in a sweet spot really, because the technology is kind of caught up with your idea almost, isn't it? And we see lots of people are trying to sort of get cloud-based gaming. I know like Nvidia have got GeForce Now, and is that sort of a similar idea where they host it and then stream like across, and then you are doing the controls, sort of similar idea? Or
I think at a high level you break it down into 3 buckets. You have traditional games that have a component of the sim that runs in the cloud, like a World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
And it's really not cloud as much as it's on-prem hardware. So they ran a server, they ran an IT closet, they had a server facility, which is like kind of like Cloud Junior. Then you have the other bucket, and oh, by the way, with a native app that you install. Then you take cloud and you run a browser that renders. You render on the browser. That's the other category. That's the class that I'm in,
Yeah.
because I want to push that work down to the client. I want the client to do the work
Yeah.
because that takes cost and load off the server. But it also makes the screen instantaneously responsive.
So no
Okay, because
latency then.
moving camera on the native device, so you have literally zero delay between your finger, your mouse, your keys, and what happens on screen. Then the third bucket is what you're seeing with Stadia, with Microsoft's initiative, with Microsoft streaming, and with Amazon just announced, I think, or maybe they had something. Somebody announced, somebody else just came into the party. You're seeing NVIDIA. So what that architecture is where the game simulation runs in the cloud, renders in the cloud to a screen, video hardware compresses that, like we're talking super fast. I don't even think it's a millisecond. It's probably a tenth of a millisecond. And then it shoots that compressed video frame down to a device, any device, quite often browsers that have hardware video decompression, and you get to see the game. Now you can do the math on that. If I move my mouse, if I hit a key, it has to go up to the server. It goes into the simulation processing. The sim has to crunch that input, has to render out a frame to a buffer, compress that frame, and display it. And they have done amazing work. Let's talk about Stadia. They have done an amazing job of producing that experience, and you do still notice latency when you play. So if you're a hardcore gamer, I don't mean like you love to play a lot, I mean hardcore. You're going to feel that latency, and it's going to bug you.
Yeah.
And
we're getting that thing now where we have like 240 frames, 240 hertz monitors and stuff, because people are like, I need to have that, like that extra little bit, and so it's...
And that's why consoles, actual physical consoles that you stick in your house, under your TV set, that's going to live on for a little while longer, until that technology goes to zero. But it won't ever go to zero in terms of latency because of the speed of light. The speed of light is going to haunt that problem till the end. But the hardcore gaming audience might get, so we're talking now about the business model of consoles. Isn't that interesting how I went there right away? Because it kind of is an integral part of cloud, because when the traditional console market dies, it has to go somewhere, right? Because people want to play those games still. They want to play those big games, those big Bethesda games, especially that have, I don't know, 50 gigabytes of data that you have to install. If you have a slow connection, you might be installing for the rest of your life until you get to play the game if you're in the country. But you might actually not install the game before Intergalactic Space Empire ships, which is kind of an interesting trade-off. I'm kidding, of course. I'm being hyperbolic and silly. That's what I do. I'm silly. So, when you look at that business and you look at what's happening with cloud, it's going to be an interesting race, but cloud will probably win in the long run. But we don't know what that run is. It could be 5 years, it could be 20. But it will win out most definitely, because games, it's becoming more and more problematic to go out and buy a new piece of hardware every single time and then go and buy a bunch of games that go out the window with that piece of hardware, and they're going to support the last gen games, and all that just goes away completely in the cloud model.
Yeah, I think I saw you talking about what was it, where you were saying like you were talking about selling Supreme Commander to consoles, and they were saying, PC gaming's going to be like, it's just going to be something that's just this it's a very niche thing. We're not interested in that. We're exclusively interested in consoles. And it's like how that paradigm has changed is amazing, isn't it? Over the last sort of 15 years, 10 years, it's absolutely amazing to see that.
Yeah. I had a game industry executive high up in one of the big publishing companies. He told me back in 2000, and I think it was like 3 or 4. Okay, so this is going back a ways. Yeah. This is before Supreme Commander even shipped. And he said to me, Chris, PC gaming is a boutique business. a boutique business. Now, boutique business is like, you go to the mall and there's all these big stores, these massive department stores. There's up at the end, there's Macy's and there's whatever. Boutiques are those little shitty things that are in the middle, like where you get your your iPhone fixed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right? That's a boutique. That's what he thought gaming was. He thought it was a boutique. And he was dead wrong. In fact, he called it the opposite. PC gaming exploded, and it became the gaming industry as far as I was concerned. I mean, you can say what you like about console gaming, but World of Warcraft, World of Tanks, all the other World of games. I mean, we're talking about the PC games. Just dominated. What he probably could have said was that RTS was becoming boutique.
Yeah.
Now, that is only a half-true statement. Real-time strategy, if invested in, if continued to, do research, could have continued on. But there was a loss of interest because something drew the interest away. It was MOBA.
Yeah.
And what happened there. And that was it's really RTS in an esports kind of format, team-based format, and it was a more exciting format. And I can't deny that folks, you look at it and you go, I get it. I don't say it wasn't like I was like, what are they doing? It was like, no, that's actually pretty cool. We did Demigod, for Pete's sake.
Yeah.
We saw it. In fact, Demigod was built right in the heart of all of that.
What was it that got? I don't mean this. This is a bit of a loaded question, but what was it that Demigod got wrong? Where, like, say, Dota or League of Legends got right? What was the? Because I didn't quite get into Demigod. I couldn't quite sort of. I played Dota and I never quite got the. I couldn't sort of step across to it, and I didn't understand what it was that it didn't do for me. And I know that's a very personal question to me, really. But was there anything that you sort of, like, in hindsight?
Yeah, Demigod did a lot right. I think I don't want to diss on the games, and it was fun. And there were people who just swore by it. Of course, maybe there always is, but the League of Legends team, they were building something that was following more closely in the footsteps of Dota.
Yeah.
And there was an art style sensibility. There was a Twitch gameplay sensibility. There was the free-to-play component where we were charging full price. They had a content factory backing that game up that was continually producing new stuff. I mean, imagine if Netflix didn't have new stuff on it every bloody week, right? You'd be like, well, HBO I'm going to go to HBO. Well, we were kind of, I think, we were caught in the old world. We built that game in the wrong model for the day. So we the style of the game and there was less whimsy in the game. It all followed a theme of gods. It followed.
I love that style, though. I really love it. Actually, as a stylistic choice, everything about that's great.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And the thing was, though, is that was the old model of PC development where you built a game around a core theme.
Yeah.
And in League of Legends, it was more dynamic, more colorful. You could bring in more whimsical stuff. Nothing was out of bounds. It felt more like the way Fortnite is. Yeah. Fortnite allows for a much. So then when you come in as an individual, you can plug in. You can find something in that. Like if you walk into a record store, if it was all pop, or if it was all reggae, or if it was all new age, you'd go, well, I don't even go in that store. But if that store has everything for you, if you can just find your section in that store, everybody's going to go to that store. And if you think about Demigod in that respect, we serviced creatively and intellectually a small vertical of the market. And sometimes you can't help it. I mean, if I'm going to make Intergalactic Space Empire, I can't have that game have clowns and covered wagons. I mean, I've got to kind of focus down on spaceships and space combat,
Yeah.
So so if you're out there in the world somewhere watching this interview and you're a game designer and you want to have your own island one day with an airstrip and I don't know your own sushi chef that you can order sushi at 4 a.m. If you want that, then you better damn well think about that content
Yeah.
an audience question.
Yeah. It's for me, I can remember the free to play model coming, like arriving, and I think this might be just a sort of telltale of my age, but I really dislike it, and I'd rather buy a game and like have the game and not be sold incremental pieces of the game over a long period of time, and that is probably to do with my age personally. But like, I feel like that was the beginning of the turning point for PC gaming in a big way. It sort of changed everything about how people make games, and like you now get things like Fortnite, which is one of the biggest games in the world. I'm not. It's not for me, but I know it sells fantastically well, and it sells on consoles really well, and it's like, well, it doesn't sell, but they make a fortune from it, and I personally find that model a bit. It's not my cup of tea really, but it's successful, isn't it? It's very successful.
Yeah, and we do need to pay attention to the fact that tastes change over the
Yeah.
years, but some tastes, like jazz, hasn't gone away.
No.
It's not like jazz came into its own. I'm using a music metaphor, obviously, but like jazz came into its own and then jazz went to zero. Jazz never went to zero. Classical never went to zero. Um, there's always going to be an audience. 100 years from now, somebody's going to be sitting there listening to jazz music, going, "This is amazing. Why aren't more people not listening? Why aren't people listening to jazz? More people. Like, why aren't more people playing real-time strategy games? Why aren't more people, that's the good thing about RTS. It's kind of like jazz."
Yeah.
In the sense that it hasn't gone to zero. There's still a number of people around the world. It might be in the millions. It could be 10 million.
Yeah.
Reaching them and getting through the noise of this world we live in, where you're being bombarded with 100 things, every day that are new and exciting, and to spend in places to spend your money. That is probably the bigger challenge than thinking, is there an audience for my game? There is an audience for your strategy game. In any, you could do a pen and paper strategy game. How do you get it to your customer, or how do you get it to the player? I like to think of people as players. I don't like to think of what we create as products. I think of their experiences and their art. I have this rant that I go on. It's a rant that I'd love to I'll do it. When Steven Spielberg creates a movie, he doesn't say, "Oh, I'm working on a new product." When J.K. Rowling thinks about the next books that she wants to write, she doesn't say, "Oh, I have a new product I'm working on." A painter doesn't say, "I've got this. Come to my studio. I'm working on a new painting." It's a wonderful product.
Yeah.
There's no talk about product, but in gaming, people talk about products. They don't do that to your art. Don't throw your art into a product box. It's not product, people. It's artistic expression, and it doesn't have to be weird. It doesn't have to sell poorly to maintain its artistic integrity. And that's something I believe in. That's why I went back to my roots, if you will, to make games in a very, very small team.
Yeah.
Because that is where the art can be created. When you get into hundreds and hundreds of people, and frankly, hundreds of millions of dollars, you move away from art and you move into a product. And even though I don't even think those they're still art, they're still just heavily, heavily, heavily commercialized art. But that's a rant that I like. I like to beat that drum because, damn it, anyway, I love games and I love the game creation and creative process. I don't want to see that being marginalized into a designer of a product when it's the designer of an actual artistic, it's a craft of artistry, not a craft of products.
It's a shame because like money basically just drives everything, doesn't it? And unfortunately, anytime you get anything that's going to be successful, someone will want a piece of that pie, and then they want to control that and then influence it and bastardize it, and that is a shame, isn't it? Because you effectively just push people like yourself further away from wanting to be any part of that. And I guess that's the sort of nature of the beast. I don't know how we fix that as a problem. It's just, it's like anything, isn't it? Like, I'm in a band, and like, fortunately for us, we'll never make any money, so none of that stuff really ever matters. So, but I see other bands that you see the wheels turning and the machine turning, and it's like, it's just, yeah, it's horrible. It's kind of,
There is an opportunity. Like when I'm talking and folks they could probably have a few different thoughts, but let's look at the big ones. Taylor is crazy. He's going off on some weird artistic thing. They all go there in the end. They all go there to die. And they just clutch the old days, and then they're whatever. Or they go, damn it, he's right. He's right. Art, rah, rah, rah. And but I'm going to reach only those people that are inclined, and it's going to help them hopefully reinforce their belief in their art. And this creates more opportunity for them. So it's a message to the artists. It's a message to the creators to keep creating, believe in your vision. Don't be distracted by money unless that money helps you build, you need money to buy paint.
yeah,
You need money to buy canvases, right? You can't get around that basic need. So you can't be 100% on the extreme, but you don't have to also go to the other end of that spectrum as well. But there will be most people will still do it because that's where they can make, that's where they live. That's their place of that's the way their business model will work for them. So they should keep doing that. But the message is to the artists to really reinforce their belief that they should focus on their art and their vision.
yeah, no, I agree. It's a shame, isn't it, when you sort of like, I'm quite, there's a few games that I like have followed for a long time. Like, I like Derek Yu, who did Spelunky, and he created like a I don't know if you know do you know about Spelunky? It's like that.
Have not heard of Spelunky. This is great.
Oh my god, Spelunky's really interesting.
Make a note. I'm going to make a note on my phone.
He's also written a book about it. So he's a guy called Derek Yu, and I think that's correct. And Spelunky's a procedurally generated roguelike platformer, and so each time you play, it's different, but it has the same. There's like a world one, and there's 4 levels in world 1, and you basically sort of go through, and you can do a variety of things, but it's just this kind of like strange procedurally generated game. You get a unique experience each time. You get 4 lives. It's brutal, and you die, and then you start again, and it's just that. But he made that game basically on his own, and then he got some recognition from it because of the idea, and it's a bit weird. And then sort of Microsoft, I think, got involved and gave him money, and then he remade the game for Xbox, and then it's sort of gone around, and now he's just released yesterday Spelunky 2 for PC, and it's on PlayStation, and it's just brilliant. I love it. But I love that procedurally generated idea. I wondered whether or not like something like that could work for RTS. Is there a possibility of like having like a procedurally generated map, procedurally generated opponents, or like, that behave in different ways, or do you know what I mean? It's quite an interesting thing, AI generated. I mean, we're reaching some fantastic AI sort of machine learned products. We can sort of generate stuff by putting things in and just kind of letting them spew out weird and wonderful things. I wonder whether or not something like that might be.
Well, it gives to get a little technical, right? Procedurally generated content gives us 2 things. It gives us variance that operates at the extreme, like we see things that we wouldn't see if we just sat down to create them directly. Mm-hmm. But it also gives us really high compression ratios because we use seeds and parameters attached to a seed.
Yeah.
So, a whole terrain like a Minecraft is a perfect example, right? You have a seed, and it can generate its determinant, which means the seed will generate the same terrain because it's working from that seed, which is fantastic. Because imagine if you had to define an infinite world like in Minecraft, you had to literally craft it with an editor like in the old days. I think when Marcus sat down to solve that problem, he realized, wait, I have no choice but to use a procedurally generated world, but it's parameterized. He has a biome, and he has a definition of a biome, and then the seed says this is going to be a biome, and then the biome comes in and it says, oh, take that seed and generate the biome, the details of the biome.
Yeah.
And when you look at the amount of data that is produced, if you play a big Minecraft game and you do a lot of exploring and you fill in a lot of areas, you're talking about vast amounts of data that is communicated in that seed. It's amazing. It's a phenomenal thing. So there's compression, and then there's surprise. Like, when you're playing a game, let's say Minecraft, I haven't played Spelunky, and you see something that's like totally bonkers.
Yeah.
And no human would have done that, but it's fun as hell.
Yeah.
Right? That's the other side of the freedom that you get from procedurally generated content. Of course, you could go in as a human and you could add controls and say, I don't want the randomly generated content to swing so far to this extreme. I'm going to bring it in a bit. Because the only time you'd really want to do it from a design standpoint is when going past a certain amount of crazy is no longer fun.
No.
You want to rein in that fun. Not rein in the fun, rather. Rein in the silly to get back to the fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love talking technical about this stuff, even though that's high level technical. It's great. You'd kind of think it was the future, but the thing is memory keeps growing and bandwidth keeps growing. So really, we don't need it for the compression. We need it more for the gameplay fun. But I still think in my world where I'm talking about a browser, so what I do is I procedurally generate one of my galaxies.
Yeah.
So all the positions of all the stars and whether they have planets or not, and asteroid belts and everything else is procedurally generated.
Yeah.
Which you kind of need to when you're talking about a galaxy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's again.
Could that work in like terms of like I don't know the specifics of Intergalactic Space Empire. Are you playing against other people, or is that against the AI, the bots, as it were, of the can you do like a single player, or does it have to be multiplayer?
Yeah, I talk about this a little bit in my Q&As that I do on my website. The original vision for Intergalactic Space Empire was, how about if I make the gameplay like the content wireframe and simple, and what if I make the galaxy, and it was multi-galaxies, it was literally intergalactic.
Yeah.
What if I do something really huge and I procedurally generate and everything else? What I realized is that it's too much to comprehend with a model that feels like it wants to slide back into a traditional RTS. So folks kind of through the zeitgeist are kind of telling me, look, they really want to play a traditional RTS. So I thought, well, let me think about this a second. I've got technology that I'm building. I've got control systems. I've got all these systems, weapons, and gameplay balance. Why don't I narrow it down? So I kind of went from this big intergalactic game where everybody could just jump in and jump out, kind of like an EVE Online style, down to sort of like what I call Rock War. So it's Intergalactic Space Empire, Rock War. That's like the first chapter in the thing. So think about it like Star Wars is the Intergalactic Space Empire, and then A New Hope is the Rock War. Okay. I think I got that right. Mapping that on, except that it won't be chronologically. It's not a movie either. Stupid. So anyway, you get the idea, right? So Rock War is the very first stage of this game, and if it's fun and people like it, then it can be expanded, and you'll get a lot of feedback and creative. So the idea was Rock War was a traditional RTS in the sense that you and I start playing. Maybe we have 5v5, and we start on asteroids, the rocks. Yeah. And we fight over the asteroids that surround a sun, and that's thematic to what's going on in the world today. Like when we think about going to Mars or thinking about going to another planet, really that makes a lot less sense, believe it or not, than going to the asteroid belt, because the asteroid belt is full of all sorts of resources and precious metals and so forth. There's one that they say is made of solid gold that's worth so much money it would destroy our gold economy. Maybe that's not a good idea to go there, but we want the gold. There's the gold, right? and that's the war. So I sort of, as a bit of the fiction, as a bit of the story backdrop of the game, it's the notion that at some point there is this land grab to go put flags and control and own all these asteroids because of the resources. Because damn it, somebody's got to have them. Like just like we did on the Earth when we expanded and put, especially our heritage, right? We were all about the flag, right? Put the flag here, put the flag. Speak my language, practice my religion. Here's my damn flag, and they're like, and let's not go there. But anyways, that's going to happen in space.
Cool.
That's going to be a space thing. We're going to, and when they don't go peacefully, then therefore that's when this RTS comes in. Yeah. Well, that got dark fast, didn't it?
So what are the secrets to sort of RTS games? How do you make them not too dense so that they become impenetrable for people that want to start, but sort of, I don't know what, like Supreme Commander for me had a Supreme Commander 2. I didn't play Supreme Commander 1, which is going to get me in trouble with anyone who is a Chris Taylor fan. I'm probably going to get slaughtered. But how do you get that sort of simplicity and also complexity? What is the secret to that, if there is such a thing?
Well, I'll tell you, if you look at Blizzard figured that out almost before. Westwood did it with Dune 2. Yeah. And they largely did it with Command and Conquer, but Blizzard came in and took it to new heights. They managed to make the lowest step that you have to take really low, but the highest step high, so that you get an onboarding of players that can feel comfortable starting out playing the game. I failed at that for the most part. Total Annihilation did a better job, I think, than Supreme Commander. Just like Dungeon Siege 1 did a better job than Dungeon Siege 2. There's a thing that happens in your development team where you're all advancing in the specific vertical subject matter of the game, and you project that onto your audience and the players, and you assume that they all know it, and they don't. Gamers are leaving the gaming ecosystem, and new gamers are coming into the ecosystem, and they're mixed in terms of not just their intellectual capacity or their ability to learn, but in their interest level and in the energy and effort they want to expend in entertainment. Like if I tell you, hey, you know what's really fun? Drag racing. Let's go build a drag racing car. And you go, it does sound good on the outside, but when we're starting to adjust the valves and the compression of the engine and figuring out why the thing caught fire and exploded, you're like, this isn't fun anymore, right? So let's just go street race in whatever we're driving. Okay, let's do that. That's easy. Accessible, right? Let's go. Let's not actually do that. Dad, if you're watching, don't do that. You can hurt someone. But anyways, the point is that accessibility to bring people into a game is such an important part of it. Even if you're a really complex designer and you have all these really deep things. And don't conflate, that's like the word of the month. Don't conflate simplicity with simplicity. I almost said don't conflate simplicity with simplicity. That would be a mistake. Simplicity with lack of depth. Yeah. Chess is simple and has tremendous depth, right? And don't conflate complexity with difficulty, with hard. Something can be complex and easy. It can be hard and simple. Like these words that feel like they're married to each other are not as a designer. So you can have a very complex game that is easy to learn, but you have to do it the right way. You have to bring people, into it. Look at Magic the Gathering. If you sat down and tried to jump into Magic the Gathering, into a game that had been evolving for a while between people, you'd be like, this is crazy, guys. I don't know what you're doing here. At least that's how I felt when I first saw it. Yeah. Start from the very beginning, and you work through it from the start. You come along. You grow inside of that game. At least that's my theory. So you have to be very aware of that as a designer, that you give folks a place to start and grow and evolve in. And that's what, I'm sure everyone thinks and then they blow it along the way. They get lost in it. It's like when I start talking, I have a simple point to make, and then I get lost making the point. Because I'm crazy, I guess. I'm old and crazy.
But that's kind of like the nature of some people's brain, isn't it? Like to sort of, I have that same sort of thing, like going off on tangents, and that's just how some creative people's brains work, isn't it? I suspect.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about how hard it is to speak concisely, cogently, directly to a point, and then shut the hell up, as you get older, that becomes harder and harder to do. Yeah. It just is. And if you're a designer, it gets hard to do in the design. So you need a group of people surrounding you that can keep you honest, and that's hard to do when you're an indie, because guess what? You're working alone, or you're working with just one or two other people. So. And then you all drink the Kool-Aid, which is like basically back full circle to what I said. You know, you're all talking about a really bad idea, and you all believe it's a great idea because it's the three of you, and you're all convinced. So let's do it.
How do you stop that? Is there a way of stopping? I'm in the process of writing a story, and I don't have any idea where it's going, and I don't know what the end will be. And I'm just writing free-form jazz writing. Now that's like the kind of stupidest way to write anything. It's like drawing a picture and not knowing what you're drawing and just kind of colouring in bits, and it's mad. How do you stop that kind of? How do you stop yourself if you're just a small team from like going down that rabbit hole of like not? How do you find your way back? Do you know what I mean? It's that. Well, does that even make sense as a question?
I don't even know. I don't know. I mean, I think that if I knew the answer to that, I'd have a sushi chef that was going to whip me up some sashimi at 4 a.m. I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd be too busy playing basketball in my bowling alley, or something like that. I hear stories. The fact, actually, I might have made that one up, but I've heard stories that I've made up. The thing is that if you let the world edit your creative, edit your vision, right? If Jackson Pollock, the guy famous for squirting, paint onto a canvas from up on a ladder and creating those really things, which was like flying in the face of traditional art, right? Saying, fuck you and your traditional, very carefully painting every little brushstroke. And that worked. Yeah. But it only worked once or twice, right? It didn't work. It worked for him, and it might have worked for someone else, but after that, I mean, it falls off. So, but that's the thing. That's the magic. You could write a story, or you could write a song. Probably a song would be a really nice match. That was nonsensical, that it had too much. It had metaphors that collapsed in on themselves. I mean, listen to the Hotel California by the Eagles. You can listen to that song 500 times. And you or 500 people could listen to it, and they all come away with something different. And in a weird way, it's brilliant, right? It's what makes the song brilliant. Now, but if you were to sit down and if Eagles had produced 10 of those in a row, that would have died on the second or third song, right? Yeah. It would have been like, you played that, you did that. You can't have that anymore. And I don't know if game design is actually as wild and crazy as those examples. So perhaps those examples are meaningless. But if you think about the process that you described, especially with writing and visual arts, you can generate your ideas that way, and then you can go back and you can pull the ones that excite you the most. Yeah. I had this idea, and maybe I should do it instead of talking about it. But should I save it?
I don't know. Well, we can edit it out. If it's brilliant, I'll clip this right out.
Send me $5 and I'll tell you. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you because it's really dumb. It's so dumb. When I was in high school, I was learning all of these formulas, and these formulas were just like, oh God, what was it? The volume of the sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed. But then it wasn't like you just were told to memorize that. You were told to memorize like 50 of these things. And you didn't know why necessarily. What's the circumference? What's the volume? Whatever. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if, someone made a painting, and they did it with the right lighting, and they did a painting of all the formulas, and you just took it and you hung it in your living room, and then when you're eating your dinner, you're just staring at this painting and you're memorizing all these formulas. And then you'd be at a party somewhere and someone goes, "What's the how do you compute something like distance?" And it's like, "Well, it's 1/2 AT squared." And they're like, "Jesus, how did you remember that Newtonian little gem?" And they're like, "Well, it was on the wall in my living room or my kitchen, and I stared at it every single day." Like, I just thought it'd be fun to have a series of formulas that you hung all over your wall. You're taking a shit, and you're like looking at them. You're like,
there it is.
I got it. Maybe it's the diameter of a cylinder, so you can compute how much body volume you dropped in the bowl. Was that too much? Have I gone too far on this?
No, I like it. I like it.
We're being a little vulgar. Vulgar bells. What else is vulgar? Oh, let's throw it all in.
It's funny the things that we need to do to like get bits of pointless information into our brains. You know, stuff that we don't necessarily feel is of any value to us, but later on you're like, oh wow, that is so helpful to have all this knowledge. It's kind of strange why our brains can't. I find it really hard. I can't just look at a piece of information and just retain that. If I go, I need to know this, remember this, it doesn't work. But if I can retain pointless pieces of information that my brain picks out at random that finds use, you know, like just all kinds of stupid Red Dwarf quotes and all kinds of crazy crap, but I can't for the life of me remember anything of any value or use. So it's weird, isn't it? It's weird how we work.
The brain is fascinating. I'm going to share one thing that I'm sure a bunch of folks listening will probably know and some won't. So let's share it, and that is talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. When a person, let's say you come over and we have a beer and we're sitting there talking, it's not crazy to tell you, hey, what if the ships, you know, had guns here and here and here, and you had, if they hit the reactor, the whole ship will, and I'm sharing with you the design of the game. And it's very, very much just standard conversation. But imagine, if you will, what it's like to stare at an empty chair. You can have the beer if you want and act like your friend is sitting in the chair, but he's not, and telling them about the guns and the reactor and everything else, the shields and how they work. You would be classified as crazy in our society. People, if someone were to walk in on you, even the dog who's sleeping looks at you every once in a while and goes, "You're crazy." like stop that. I'm feeling very insecure right now. I don't know if you're going to be able to feed me because you're talking. Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me? Is it dinner? Because that's my dog. Every time I even say anything, the dog thinks it's time for it to eat. But my point is that we hold back and we restrict ourselves in our own private places, in our homes. You know what you could do? You can go to the store if you want and buy a can of paint, and you can paint your ideas on your wall of your house. You're allowed to do that. It's your house. It's your wall. Unless you're renting, perhaps, and it's like red paint and you can't paint over it or something, right? But let's say it is your house. Give yourself permission to do whatever you want. Give yourself permission to talk in the mirror and dance and sing and talk about crazy ideas and make faces. You know, when you don't allow your own self to live on the outside of you, when you force you into your head and keep it contained like a wild beast and don't let it out, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. So I'll walk up to the mirror and I'll be standing there naked and I'll go, "You fat ass, stop with the food. You know, great abs start in the kitchen, so you better get down to that kitchen." And I talk crazy.
Yeah.
And I'm nuts. And I have a conversation. I love myself, and I let my ideas out, and I hear what I'm thinking. And then it gets back to the point we were talking about, where we can remember things better because we heard them said.
Yeah.
It goes out of our mouth from some part of our brain, like some piece of our brain. It goes out of our mouth. It goes back into our ears, which pushes it through another part of our brain. So right away, an idea went from, 5% or 10% of our brain, it went to 20 or 30% of our brain, just because we said it out loud. And now we're more likely to remember it. So that's some crazy shit right there. That is some crazy, crazy shit. And I just said,
I like sometimes have those moments where I'll be thinking something and then it will just I'll like, even if I'm just in the middle of a conversation, I'll be thinking something, I'll go, must say that, and then it's gone, and it's just like that moment is just completely forgotten, and it's just wiped from the hard drive, or wiped from the usable part of my brain. Strange, so strange, so frustrating, isn't it?
Have you ever had like an orchestral score playing in your head? Just like you just hear it, it's amazing. There's the whole orchestra playing, and you don't know if it's a song you've heard or whatever, and you think, God, I really like that. That is really nice. And then you wake up the next morning, and like you said, it is completely gone.
Yeah.
In every way, and it's sad. It's sad because you think, could I have been a composer if I had learned to write that shit down? How do you write it down? How do you write a full orchestra that you hear in your head down?
That always amazes me. Like, I love the idea that someone can go, I have that, like literally, like you described, a composer could go, I know, I can hear all the instruments. Like, what is that? How does that work? That's amazing. We're pretty close. I mean, I saw like Elon Musk is getting quite close to the is it cerebral chip? That's going to be going into the brain that can be like. I don't know if you've seen this or not. That's going to be it, isn't it? That's going to be the moment. We're going to be able to translate these ideas into like information. Well, that's going to be pretty wild.
I have to admit. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. I've got quite a few questions, and I know we're running short on time.
Let's blast.
Do you have any? What's your thoughts on like VR? Are you interested in that?
I have this game I play on my HTC Vive called Beat Saber.
Yeah.
And I love it because it doesn't make me sick, and I stay in shape with it, at least cardio wise, right?
Yeah.
I'm working on my six pack. Which everyone I tell, my kids, everybody, they laugh at me when I say that every time. I get a good chuckle. They're like, no, you're not working on your six pack. I'm like, how do you know that? I can work on it forever. But anyway, so Beat Saber's part of that, and it's pretty. I'm drenched with sweat. I shower after Beat Saber, and I come out and I start sweating still. Like that's how sweaty that game makes me.
Yeah.
Which is disgusting, I think. The fact is VR. VR. I think it's disgusting. I really do. I don't think.
I sympathize with that. I really sympathize with that. I suspect I would be in a similar state.
You have to like wait an hour after you play Beat Saber.
You need to take cold showers. Cold showers is the answer.
Oh, I have to. The door is unlocked. I have to unlock the front door.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. Let's pause.
Time.
Beat Saber.
Beat Saber. So basically, I am completely nerded out on VR, but I don't see VR going mainstream when a headset costs $1,000.
Yeah.
$1,000. And
They've got like the Quest are coming out. I know they've got like Facebook stuff, but they're like $300. They're a bit closer.
It is a bit closer. It truly is. And I don't think we should be too cheap about this. I think, when we're paying $800-900, I mean, an iPhone 11, when it came out, the 256 gigs was $1,400 US.
Yeah.
And my son, who's 18, he wanted one so badly, he had to save his money and figure out how to get his hands on that. He had to have it.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you, crazy? We bought whole computers for $1,400.
I know, it's mad, isn't it? That's so interesting that our like mind changes. That the £1,400 is now phone money. I remember buying phones for like £30. That was a big investment.
Yeah, and so VR, I think the sweet spot is down in the 200 to 400 range. That's a question, but it's also because it does something. It makes people sick. It's the content is probably leans towards violence, and then for it to get wider, it has to have a more and the production values, by the way, are not there because, of course, the investments are in the singular $1 million. They're not. I don't know that anyone has spent $100 million developing a VR game.
No.
So there's a multitude of challenges that VR has. I think ultimately it will be it's here to stay. It's not like VR was 20 years ago when VR came in and then failed. It's here to stay and it will grow. And how big that market gets, I don't know. But what I've always said is AR is absolutely going to be the king between AR and VR. The idea that I have glasses on and I can see, I could have unlocked the front door just now with my AR headset by just simply looking up and staring at a spot and having it activate a burn down timer, or whatever the interface mechanisms are. Maybe Elon Musk's neural connection, or whatever. Hell, we don't even have to dial up. I'll just send you my interview in a microsecond.
Yeah.
Something stupid. I don't know what's happening right now. I don't even know who.
It's amazing. I'm really excited to see what's on the horizons for VR. I suspect it's going to be, like you say, it's a bit of a novelty at the minute, but it could be incredible. I mean, like the idea of like having like an AR RTS battle on your table, it converts it into something, or any of these things. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
It is.
The one thing I know the answers because I've watched the interview, but Supreme Commander 3, it's not something that will ever happen from your point of view.
Certainly, I don't have any control over that. It's owned by Square Enix.
Yeah.
They would have to decide that it's part of their business plan to produce another game in that series. From my perspective, it's easier to just go design a new game, which is what I'm doing.
Could you skin it? Could you like create an engine of which you could skin and just people would know, like a little wink, a little nod. Maybe it could be called like Supreme Commander.
From a legal perspective, you'd probably be getting yourself into a little gray area. And I like to avoid those legal gray areas.
Yeah.
I think that for me, one of the things, if I were to share with you a concept of creativity, people for years, there's an automatic, almost human condition to want to create and own something, right? I create it, I want to own it.
Yeah.
And then imagine if let's use Steven Spielberg because everybody kind of knows. Imagine when Spielberg did Jaws, it wasn't for the studio, it was his.
Yeah.
And someone said, "Oh, that's great. Now you can make Jaws 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7." Yeah. Would we rather have Spielberg cranking out Jaws sequels or have him go on and make E.T. and Close Encounters and Raiders of the Lost Ark or whatever, Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
Of course we want all those other movies. And then what happens is some B director comes along, or aspiring director, a director who's cutting his teeth in the world of directing, goes and makes those sequels for a while and says, "Okay, now I'm ready to direct an original picture." Yeah. So I think if you think about game designers as being kind of like directors, which there's a real close parallel, except that it's the marriage of director and screenwriter in one package. I really like to live in the world where I go from one project to the next and I create new experiences, really different, diverse things. Yeah. It's hard to say that across the board. Like you can't, that's not a rule. Like I would have loved at one point, to have done Total Annihilation 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would have, I wanted to because there was unfinished business in Total Annihilation. It was the beginning, and I wanted to finish it off, and I couldn't, and I could be miserable about that and lay in bed at night wishing and wondering and driving to that goal of how do I get to do the sequel, or I can just move on and design Intergalactic Space Empire with a whole bunch of fresh ideas, some of which are Total Annihilation 2 ideas.
Yeah.
Right? There's a full strategic zoom in it that allows you to move the wheel and zoom in and zoom out over the entire. You can see three galaxies and then all the way down to a ship. If you
why isn't that on everything? That seems
bad,
doesn't
it? It's kind of true that even if you don't zoom out long way, zooming out a little bit more is actually really. But you see, the engines have to be designed to do it. And a lot of these architectures that we saw back in the 90s and 2000s just couldn't do it.
No.
The teams just couldn't, because they would have to rewrite the whole engine. So that's why the Command and Conquers and the Warcrafts and things like that just didn't do it. But there was some design vision in it too. Some designers that I've talked to over the years, they've actually gone, they've made the fine point, or not the fine point, the very specific point, that they don't believe that it's the gameplay they want. They want the player to be up close in the details of the game. So it's not always about technology.
No, it feels really, from my point of view, it feels like a bit of a crap excuse, because it's like you can get in as close as you want on Supreme Commander 2. You can be you can get right into their little faces, and you can be as far out as you want as well. And so, like, having that option is like, that's what you want, isn't it? Really, but I can understand that. I have got an interesting question from my point of view. What would you make if there were no limitations to technology, manpower, finance? What would your dream project be? Is it this?
Yeah, I was asking that question 20 years ago, and I answered the question. I'll give you two parts of this: how I answered it 20 years ago and how I answered it today. 20 years ago, I thought it'd be cool to take like a New York City and model it all out, and then give everyone in the city an identity. Like, they wouldn't have to be the real people, but they would be people sort of as if they were going to work every day and traveling around. I thought a simulation of a city, and I'm not talking about SimCity, I'm talking about the people component of it, would be really, really interesting. But from a gameplay perspective, I didn't have an answer. I didn't know why it would be fun. It would probably just be interesting, and it would be expensive. Today, I realize the folly of that. I realize the folly of things that are big being better. There's no correlation between big and better. Big can sometimes be better. And in the early days, things were so small. When you made a small thing bigger, it got better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was no question that it's like a bell curve, and we were coming up the side of the bell curve, and we did get to the sweet spot where things were big enough. But going bigger takes you down the backside of the bell curve.
Yeah.
So when you have infinite money and resources and talent, access to maybe the team of the best and of the best, you don't go to higher necessarily points on the graph. By virtue of the fact that you have that, it has to be idea driven, and it's not necessarily unlocked by money and resources. Just let's call it resources.
Yeah.
There has to be a new experience in there, and then that experience could very well define the resources. My guess is they wouldn't be infinite. They wouldn't be even close to what these big budget games are consuming today, the $200 to $300 million games. It would be far less than that, but it would fail utterly if the concept wasn't stimulating and frankly thought-provoking. I love thought-provoking content. That's when I look at a film, when the film is over, I ask myself, was it thought-provoking? Did it generate a new view into the world or into myself? If it was absolutely fantastic with lots of shooting and explosions and dialogue was funny and everything else, but there was nothing in it that was thought-provoking, the movie literally disappears from my head the minute I stop watching it.
Yeah.
So ask yourself the question: does thought-provoking game design come about with resources, or does it come about with pure artistic inspiration? And it comes about clearly. It answers itself, right?
Yeah.
So I would start with the creative inspiration part of it, and then back into what does it cost to build it, and probably more likely than not, it's far, far less than the budgets that we're seeing today. Which is why I think that Kanoogi, with what I'm doing, will cause instant thought provocation, and people will go, "Oh, even though I may not want to play this game, oh, what I can do in this platform." So Kanoogi is not just a game; it's a Kanoogi is a platform.
Yeah.
It's not a game; it's a platform, and it's the name of the company. Intergalactic Space Empire is a demonstration of what can be done with cloud and a browser, and then there's the possibility. I'll add this just to complicate my point. You can have a native app that you install and run on Kanoogi. It doesn't preclude the fact that it doesn't mean that you can't have a native app. It just means that you give people an immediate one button press to play the game in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
That's what the platform gives you. It gives you a low friction. But the cloud component is where the magic is. It's really all about the cloud. The cloud gives you no limitations to the upside computation that you need, and it gives you connectivity, global connectivity, and it gives you scalability. If you don't know how many people are going to play your game, you don't care because the system auto scales, and you only pay for what you use in the cloud. You don't have to build out a data center of your own and buy all the hardware and predict. Remember in the old days when Sony Online would launch a new game?
Yeah.
And they would either have underwhelming success or overwhelming success. So they either bought too much hardware or they bought too little hardware.
Yeah.
But very seldom are you going to buy the right amount of hardware, right? Well, cloud makes this completely go away. So your creativity can be a little bit more wild because you've got that elasticity on the computational side. So I'm all over the place at this point, but I think in all of that, you might see that really my brain isn't about resources anymore. It's about creativity.
Yeah.
That's the summary.
Because we've had a, like, someone was saying something along the lines of this is the worst quote ever, but you know, when Google started to offer like free online space where you could like upload your stuff, and they had like Google Drive and Google Photos, the scalability of that at the start seemed like an incredibly mad idea to give that to everybody, so you can just upload as many photos as you want. But they bet on technology. They bet that actually technology would move forwards at such a fast rate that by the time that they got to the point where it was a trouble, actually they had enough money and they had enough resources to actually make that work. And so that sort of just-in-time sort of scalability idea is actually never seems to be a business model that fails, which is quite an interesting sort of proposition, really.
Yeah. We've always bet on Moore's law. And Moore's law has delivered. Even when people say it slows down, it still delivers.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
We had a situation where like we expected CPUs to be, increasing in speed, but actually we've now gone for like the amount of cores we get, and that's how we've got round that sort of speed issue, which is quite cool. Is there anything wrong? It's probably the last question because I think we're going to run out of time. But is there anything wrong with the industry, and is there a way to fix it? So for me, I felt like it was like, I don't know, free to play was my bugbear, but I think that is about to stay, isn't it, really? Is there anything from your perspective?
When I'm a younger me would have probably said there's a lot of problems. I've come full circle, I think. It's like the way I feel about governments, the way I feel about the way humanity is treating the planet.
Yeah.
I can complain about it. I can try to do something about it. And what you do is you do it as an individual instead of trying to convince a group of people that it must change. It's kind of how you do it. You vote with your dollars. You vote with your how you conduct yourself in everyday life. The gaming industry 20 years ago, I would have said the problem was that the business model that it adopted was from the recording industry.
Yeah.
And the recording industry model was, for those who don't know it, was that a band that, a garage, they got together, they played local places, they had no money.
Yeah.
So a recording label would come along and say, tell you what, we will sign you up and we will pay to put you into a professional recording studio. We will bring structure to your lives. We will put a professional recording engineer behind the sound engineer on this, and we'll bring a producer in who has an ear, and we'll help you tune and tweak this and make you into a hit band. And when the band went out and sold 1 million records, double platinum or whatever that was, whatever they described that, and they would sell this, let's say there was a gross revenue of $10 to $15 million. Then the band was told they had a royalty of 20%. So they thought, oh, well, we're going to get $2 million. Well, the 5 of us are going to get $400,000 each.
Yeah.
And their naivete was that, of course, the 20% was after all the costs and deductions were removed. So they charge for the recording studio. They charge for all the the tour bus. They charge for all the green M&Ms they ate, and the recording engineer's salary came out of it. By the time everybody's salary was out of it, it was 9.1 of the $10 million was consumed
Yeah.
by the business, by the recording industry business, and the band got 20% of the 900,000. And that model seemed like it made sense to common sense people, because they went, well, of course the band can't get a royalty of the expenses that were being generated, or those have to be paid for first. It's like out of the profits. And the thing is that the recording labels, they knew how this was done, and so they made sure to move every single thing they could into the cost of production. So they were paying off that recording studio. They were amortizing and the band was paying off the recording studio, the recording label, the label's business expenses. If the studio executive went out for a steak dinner, that was part of the operating expense of the label, and it had to come out of the proceeds from record sales, right? It was basically kind of a corrupt system.
Yeah.
And video game industry took that model and made that the de facto model. So when I sold 1 million copies of a game, and I won't point fingers at any particular label, they deducted all of the expenses, the cost of the game's distribution, the insurance, the freight, the CD, the executive overhead, and I got nothing.
Yeah.
I made no money. I never, ever got a royalty check at Gas Powered Games from Dungeon Siege 1 or 2, Supreme Commander 1 or 2. None of those games gave me a royalty check on sales.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Those games sold really, really well. Now, am I sitting around grousing and complaining and bitching and moaning about it? No, I'm answering your question because you asked, but it was a real issue, because if I had been paid more fairly, I could have had more independence, and I could have invested in more games, and the company I could have paid my team more money. I mean, they were not making a lot of money as individuals, so they weren't able to buy houses and save for their children's educations, right? Honestly, the wages were terrible. And that was the problem with the industry. But the industry has changed now. The industry has changed. Those deals aren't done that I know of. They're more fair and balanced, and the likelihood that a studio of creative people can be successful is quite a bit higher.
Yeah. Is that because of the sort of indie scene? Is that sort of how that has...
The indie scene is part of it, because it put pressure on the rest of the industry, and we like that. And that's the market. That's capitalism. So the system did sort itself out, but there was a time that I grew my business in, which was this bubble, and there was nowhere I could go to get a break. Everybody was using that model, and you know what? I can't completely complain. I had a lot of fun. I got to do what I wanted. I got to create. But there's game creators that are coming into the industry today that I think are going to have a lot more financial. They're gonna earn more for what they create. We're seeing some pressure right now on the 30% cut that Apple's taking. That cut that's going to reflect in Valve. That's going to reflect in it's going to go through Epic is putting pressure on that. Yeah. And I think that those numbers will go down. 30% is too high. The real number might be 10%. It might be 12%, but it isn't 30%.
No.
So that's the other thing, that if we're going to just call it out, we might as well just say it, call a spade a spade. 30% is too high. Yeah. And I don't know what the ultimate number will be, but it won't be 30%.
Well, I'm getting a bit of feedback on my audio. I was just going to say, I mean, thank God for the indies, thank God for the PC gaming, because it's seems to be that's why that sort of changed, maybe. When you've got few people who are the gatekeepers, that's so easy for them to kind of keep that sort of money machine changing for them. I'm going to say goodbye because I know you need to go. Thank you so much, Chris Taylor. Thank you so much for spending your time with us, and thank you for answering all those questions. And I'm really looking forward to checking out Intergalactic Space Empire. If you haven't signed up to Kanoogi, sign up to it now. Go and have a little look. Yeah,
thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Have an awesome Wednesday night.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to be going to bed.
All right.
Lovely.
Take care.
Take care. Cheers, Chris. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.